Welcome back to the Soaring Show, your weekly roundup of gliding news. As always, Jake will give us a soaring forecast for the weekend, and in this episode we also interview Josh Setford, who is currently training to become an airline pilot for free. More on that later. But first, the news. The club class nationals at Nimsfield are coming to a close on Sunday. The weather has not been kind to them, and so far they've only had 3 racing days. The usual suspects are at the top of the leaderboard. Tom Arscott is in first place, with John Roberts only about 30 points behind him. Further down the board is where things get interesting. Seb VDS, the very first guest on our show, is nipping at the heels of junior British team pilot George White. A quick reminder that Seb only did his 50k last year. There's more drama because the Cirrus Seb is flying belongs to Alistair Empson, who is also in the competition and currently behind Seb. Awkward. Slightly further afield at the Europeans, the Brits are putting up a good fight. In the 50-metre class, Owen McCormack has moved into 3rd overall, and in the standard class, Henry Inigo Jones is 2nd overall. The competition has over a week to go, so we'll keep an eye on it. Still in Europe, but further south, last member Ben Flewett has been dominating the field at Rieti. When I say dominating, I mean it. 7-day wins, he came 2nd twice, and had a nightmare on the last day when he came in 3rd. Although his scoring is only preliminary at the time of recording. To summarise, on his worst day, he still finished on the podium. The MDM-1 Fox is an extraordinary aerobatic glider, but what if you strap 2 jet engines to it? Well, you can see the insane creation in Stefan Langer's latest video, where he visits the biggest airshow in the world, Oshkosh. The creator Bob Carlton and his machine perform at dusk at the event, and you can find the footage at the EAA website linked below. Back in the UK, Ed Oliver has just completed his diamond height, and if you're thinking to yourself, where have I heard that name before? It was here, on the show, last week when he completed his first 500k, and 2 weeks before that when he completed his first 300k. Ed, well done. For the nosy among you, his flight is linked below. He took off from Lueni Park, which leads me nicely onto the next story. Lueni Park CFI Chris Gill and previous Soaring Show guest, video link below, is up to something. He departed Denbigh last Saturday and flew to Millfield, then to Portmogue, then to Bourneville Easterton, came back to Millfield and has just departed Sutton Bank. The only clues so far are the phrase GlideX, and it has something to do with a brand new style of competition. Whatever it is, it sounds exciting. There's a BJ notice that Stratford Gliding Club is the latest BJ club to be Wing accredited, which sounded interesting, so I had a look. Wing starts for Women and Inclusivity in Gliding, and it's an initiative that aims to make gliding more diverse by addressing the usual gliding deterrents. These include making sure that bathrooms are clean and available, ensuring that ballads can be fitted to suit lighter pilots, and ensuring mentoring schemes are in place for the less confident and assertive individuals. The scheme is run by Yvonne Elliott, and you can find the contact details below. Well, that was a lot of news. Next up is Jake with the weather, and after that we'll chat with Josh Setford about how you could become an airline pilot for free. Over to Jake.
Thank you, Dorian. Let's get into the weather. So, surface pressure charts from the Met Office. This is midnight Friday night going into Saturday. The dominant feature of the weekend is really going to be the frontal systems. So going into Saturday, the south of England and Wales is going to be dominated by these little frontal systems here. And really, the sort of judgment of how good a day you're going to have depends on where these happen to fall during the day. So yeah, we'll have a look a little bit later at how you can work that out in the morning. On Sunday, this is going into Sunday morning, and then Sunday during the day, you can see we've got more fronts coming in from the west, this time a warm front, and again the positioning of that will dictate how good a day we all have. Going into Monday, these 2 fronts start to converge, so it'd be fair to say the word of the weekend is going to be fronts. Looking at the forecast for Pocklington, because they look like they've got decent weather both days. So Saturday, general weather forecast says it's going to be cloudy during the sort of late morning, early afternoon, brightening up later on. Surface winds, it says 10 miles an hour southwest, gusting 25 plus later in the afternoon. And looking at the BBC rather now as a cross-reference, it's looking similar, so should be able to trust that. And a quick look at Sunday while we're here. Sunday, it looks a bit brighter, lighter winds, so we're looking now at a light southeasterly, and the BBC agrees. No real risk of rain on Sunday for Pocklington. Skysight, so PFD over the whole of the UK. Saturday is looking good in Ireland and Northern Ireland and probably the northeast of England, but quite tricky to fly anywhere else or get decent cross country anywhere else, I think. Let's look at thermal updraft velocity, thermal strength and boundary shear ratio. And this is 11 AM Saturday morning, midday, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. So you can see the south is going to be dominated by these showers. Got these little showery icons. The north is hopefully going to avoid most of the showers, and there's decent thermals, 3.5 knots, maybe 4.5 knots where it's good. This mottled overlay that you see here indicates where the thermals are going to be difficult to centre, and that's usually because of a combination of wind or boundary shear in the wind. But in the northern region up here, it looks okay. Looks like a half decent day. Quick look at cloud base. Cloud base is to be expected somewhere between 3,500 and 4,250 feet. This is in the middle of the afternoon on Saturday, and you can see it's still dominating a lot of rain in the southeast on Saturday afternoon. Looking at Sunday, PFD for Scotland looks good, and across much of England actually looks pretty good on Sunday. Again, we're going to look at thermal strength. Thermal strength's a little bit weaker, apart from where those sort of localised areas where it's good, those hot spots, looks like towns really, maybe where the ground is a bit drier and had a bit less rainfall, or the rain's drained away quicker. Cumulus cloud base. This is midday on Sunday. These greens are 3,600 feet. The yellows 5,000 feet. So again, looking better in the northeast on Sunday. I suspect that's probably because it avoids most of the rain that's coming through on Saturday. But even in the south, around Cambridge, you're expecting 3,000 foot cloud base in the middle of the day. Further to the west, over the Cotswolds, 3,500 feet. It's looking like cumulus, and blue over sort of the north of the Midlands, I'd say. And just a quick look at the wind. Sunday's looking much lighter, southeasterly winds. Let's look at what the forecasters are saying. So this is Dave Masson at Lasham. Let's find his forecast. He is talking on Saturday about, from Lasham, might be okay for 300 to 500k plus if you can get away to the better soaring to the north. So yeah, as I say, it's going to depend on where the fronts lie. On Sunday, warm southerly flow at Lasham, blue to 4,000 initially, and good for 300 to 500k. Possibility of shallow Q is what Dave Masson's saying, which lines up with what Skysight's saying. On the Dunstable forecast, on Saturday he's saying thermic beneath top cover, Sunday blue, southeasterly and warm. And Sid's weather, Saturday, he said, again talking about the fronts and the risk of light drizzle, but clearing in the afternoon. So yeah, basically on Saturday it looks like it could be good, but I would be looking at the satellite pictures and working out exactly where those fronts are likely to fall, whether they're going to be ahead of forecast or a bit behind. And yeah, if you can get up between the fronts, I think you'll probably get some decent soaring weather. In the north it looks like it's going to be better. And then on Sunday I think the whole country is going to be a bit more homogeneous, but perhaps a bit bluer, a bit weaker. Well, hope you have a good weekend, and I'll pass back to Dorian. Cheers.
Thanks, Jake. And now we come to Josh, who is currently in Spain in ground school with awful Wi-Fi, so apologies for the quality. For the aspiring airline pilots among you, Josh has some fantastic advice.
The reason you're here is because, well, when I tell people I fly, I learned to fly, and then find out I've learned to fly gliders, the first question I get asked is, will I ever learn to fly real planes? And I feel like what you've done is you've done that. You've learned to fly real planes. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, and we'll go from there.
So I'm Josh Setford. I'm 21. and I'm currently studying for my airline transport pilot license on a fully funded cadet scheme with a UK airline in the South of Spain. Started gliding when I was 13, went solo on my 14th birthday, and the rest, as they say, is history.
So what does that mean that you're fully funded? Does that mean you get a job at the end of it, or does it mean they just pay for the training and then set you off into the wild?
I'm tagged by an airline, and then I do have a job guaranteed at the end of it, so it means that both I don't have to pay the ridiculous amount of money that you have to pay for pilot training usually, and also that I don't have to worry about not finding a job at the end of it.
I know a lot of people who really want to go into power flying, and they all realise that it's too expensive. So they start gliding, but a lot of them then stick with gliding. They sort of really enjoy it and they want to keep it going. So where was that moment for you that you said, oh, I want to actually keep going and then get my power licenses and then do the airline flying side of thing?
I think it was always the sort of thing at the back of my mind that was what the end goal was. I think, however, it took over a lot of my life. That sort of makes sense. Like when I started gliding, my sort of only real objective was to go solo, which I think is how it is for a lot of people. When they start, they don't really see it become a full-time sort of thing, but then it very quickly became my life. I sort of discovered, did an aerobatics badge when I was 14, just after I went solo, and from there I met the right people to sort of point me in the direction of like the Winter Series and things like that, which then started to get me onto the idea of competitive flying. And then there's always been like something that's been pushing me along to go with gliding. I was just sort of planning on doing a bit of gliding really until I was 16 and could get a job and start paying for power flying. And then I sort of realised that the financial situation of having to pay for the training myself was likely to preclude becoming an airline pilot at that stage of my life. So the whole idea of starting power flying sort of took a bit to the back burner then. So I was quite happy to stay with gliding to get my flying fixed. I mean, for me, it's, we're up in the air all the time, so it doesn't matter whether I've got an engine or not. And if anything, the challenge of gliding sort of allured me to it a bit more as well. Not to say that power flying isn't a challenge, but it's a different kind of challenge. And I really liked how it constantly drove me to get better at something with, flying competitions and flying cross country and things like that. I think that kept me going with it. And eventually this pretty funded opportunity came along, and that meant that it became a reality for me. I was probably still going to stick with gliding, but I was starting to think about starting power flying again. I sort of got hold of handed the golden ticket.
Did you do any power flying before this opportunity came along?
No formal, really. I did the 2 power flying lessons when I was 12 that I said about, but not since then. Just hopping in with mates, and so I knew that I enjoyed it, but no formal flying lessons since then.
I think a big appeal of this interview in particular is going to be for people who are like you. Their end goal is they want to become airline pilots. So I guess let's walk through the journey then. So first of all, how did you find out about this opportunity coming up? What should people be on the lookout for if they're interested? Is there where should they look?
I'd recommend looking at the major airlines. So not to name any, but like you can look on their websites, and that will give you a broader picture of their recruitment situation in general. But also there's useful pages on social media such as Pilot Careers Live that will also help whenever an opportunity comes up. But also through gliding, just the networking opportunities are immense. There's so many airline pilots who glide for their enjoyment to get some proper flying in. So I wouldn't have heard about my sponsored initiative if it wasn't for the pilots that I knew at Lasham, and that was a massive help for me to get my sort of stuff into gear and get my application ready for that.
What do you need to have prepared? Is there a pot of money you need for accommodation? Is there education requirements? Is there flight abilities that you need?
Pretty much all airline recruitment is done based off the competency-based interview, competency-based assessment. So there's basically a list of pilot competencies that you can find online quite readily, where basically anyone from any walk of life can demonstrate these pilot competencies, but gliding will especially allow you to demonstrate them competencies. For latency struck again, I think there was something about like any accommodation requirements or education requirements. Accommodation is fully provided on this scheme. Education-wise, I mean, the only requirements for it were GCSEs, because everything that you need to be successful in completing pilot training can be assessed in other ways. I think airlines are I don't think what the right word is, but they're probably well aware that the GCSE results or A-level results that someone got don't necessarily define that person. Some of the brightest people that I know probably didn't do the best in their GCSEs, so they can test what they actually need in other ways, such as psychometric testing or like aptitude testing. They can test it through that, so there's not actually really much need for, to be a straight A student. The only real need, I think, is to have 6 GCSEs from my own.
That's interesting because, looking back when I looked at it, this is a long time ago now, it seemed to be the case that you had to be basically an A-star student and have a degree in aerospace and that sort of stuff to even get thought about. So it seems like the goals have shifted a little bit. What do those competency tests look like? What are they actually looking at? Can you give us any sort of examples or questions they ask?
Yeah, so for competency-based interviewing, it'll be something along the lines of, tell me about a time that you, for example, had to be assertive to make your point heard, something along those lines. So they'll be looking for sort of your interpersonal skills, sort of how you communicate and how you adapt to communicate. So there's 9 pilot competency, only 7 of which they're really be interested in for cadet recruitment, because you're not really expected to be able to demonstrate that you can fly an aircraft, either manually or using the autopilot, which are 2 of them. But you can find these competencies online. It basically gives you what evidence is them competencies. So you can sort of think about how you have demonstrated them competencies in your everyday life, and gliding's perfect for communication skills, teamwork and leadership skills, all of them sort of things you can demonstrate perfectly using examples from gliding. And then for the other tests, there's psychometric testing, there's all sorts of weird tests like hand-eye coordination, basic one where you have to fly a ball through a tunnel, and that sounds really simple, but the tunnel's moving and all sorts of stuff, or counting a random number of balls on the screen. It's all very odd psychometric testing. You can go down a whole rabbit hole with that, but basically tests to measure your aptitude to become a pilot, and test interviews to see if you have the qualities that are required for a pilot.
Do you remember any of the questions you were asked that you answered in terms of gliding?
There were no questions specifically about gliding. There were generally quite open questions where you could use an example from any walk of life. So, for example, if you'd only worked in a store, you could probably get together a teamwork and leadership one. But I can't think of any specific ones because I've been asleep since that interview. But tell me about a time we've had to show good leadership qualities, for example. Well, I remember when I was 14 and I was running a launch point at a gliding club, so you'd have to delegate. Well, certificating isn't quite the word that should be associated with leadership, is it? But you'd have to assign people to retrieve gliders, someone to run wings and things like that. You can, although you probably won't get asked anything specifically about gliding, you can tailor your examples to gliding would provide you with the examples that will demonstrate the competencies that they're looking for.
So tell me about the application process. What does it look like?
Fairly standard stuff from the very first stage. So that's submitting a CV, and then it goes on to asking you. There's a few tests at the next stage, which were sort of testing your situational judgment was one of them. So if this happens, what would you do? There's sort of multiple choice answers, and then you pick the one that you think is most appropriate. Or then there's the numeracy test, and then there's a checking test to sort of check your attention to detail sort of thing. From there, it moved on to my first in-person assessment stage, which was with the flying school. So we did a group exercise, and we did some basic reasoning tests. So that's basically, like I said, with not really needing many GCSEs, you don't need excellent straight A student sort of grade. They test your numeracy during the application process anyway, so they know if your numeracy isn't up to scratch. It doesn't really matter if you didn't get an A star in maths, for example. So there was them sorts of tests then, and then there was hand-eye coordination. Then there was an interview with the flying school. Then there was one last in-person assessment day, which consisted of group exercise, more hand-eye coordination tests, more interviews, and then a reflective interview to see how you felt you performed throughout the process. It was long.
So are these all phases you have to pass and then get on to the next one, or is it you do the application side of things, then you get onto all the exercises, and then once you do the exercises, then you get told yes or no?
So you have to pass each stage. So, for example, the first sort of batch of stages was everyone did the first 3 tests, and then based off of them first 3 tests, they then look at your CVs and then decide who's going forward for the first in-person assessment day, because there would be physically too many people who apply for these well into the thousands, the people who apply for these sponsored pathways. They just wouldn't be able to get through everyone in an interview. But at the end of the day, going back to gliding, you get excellent advice from people at gliding clubs, people who are in the airlines industry, who can help you make your CV stand out and that sort of thing. So to help you get through to them stages and help advise you on how to prepare for the next.
And then you get through all that, you say, yeah, we'd like you to come onto the course. What happens then?
Lots of admin, so sort of security referencing to make sure that you've not got a dodgy, shady past, or to make sure that you've pretty much done everything that you said you have. Then obviously a class 1 medical, which is one of them extremely stressful things because now everything's just riding on the fact that you don't have any health conditions that you didn't know about. There was a 5-month wait for me to then start the training. I think I found out in December, and then I started in May. So there was just me finishing up with my previous job now before going out, and then flew out to Spain and doing my ground school now. So I'm about halfway through my first phase of ground school. At the beginning of October, I'll have 6 exams, and then we go and do some flying in a Piper Warrior. So generally about 65 hours in that phase, which will take me through until Christmas. I'll come back and do the remaining 7 subject, and then we go back and do the rest of the flying. So you'll do a bit more flying on the Piper Warrior, then you'll upgrade to something nice with 2 engines, the Diamond, and then that takes you right through to your commercial pilot license and your multi-engine instrument racing. And then after you've done all that, you then get put in the either the 737 sim or the A320 simulator to do your multi-crew cooperation endorsement sort of thing, which then basically teaches you how to work in a multi-pilot environment, because up until then you'll be working in a single pilot environment and there's a lot of big differences. But apart from that, at the end of it, you're a fully licensed pilot. You just need to do the type rating, which is then done with your airline. There's no delays, then I should be with my airline flying on the line for them towards the end of next year. When I started looking at properly applying for these sponsor schemes, I started taking a competency bank sort of thing. So whenever I did something that I thought demonstrated them competencies, particularly in gliding, I'd add it. So say, for example, I had to, bit of an extreme example, but say I had to take control from the flight as PC, then I'd go home and I'd take notice of that, so that when it comes to preparing for an interview, I've got that competency nicely to hand. It's surprisingly difficult to think that far back when it comes to an interview. You're sort of like, oh God, I've got this interview on Thursday or something. It can be quite difficult to think of an example for a time when you show this specific skill for this specific question. Whereas if you've got this nice bank of examples that you can draw on, that makes it a lot easier for you, and also means that experience really won't go to waste.
That's what I wanted to do. When I was younger, I wanted to be an airline pilot. That was my whole goal. And the first stepping stone that you overcome by finding a funded course was the fact that it was just never going to happen financially. It just wouldn't happen. But then after that, I had this idea that being an airline pilot meant just learning all the system by hand, and all it was going to be is just reading book after book after book with wiring diagrams. That was the image I had in my head. So I'd like people to get an understanding of what the real world looks like, what the challenges look like, but also what the positives of it look like.
And there is some necessary evil of having to, I've got to read this stuff about electric. I'm kind of hopeless with electrics. That's something that I've had to put a lot of time and effort into. Yeah, at the end of the day, you're investing time to be knowledgeable about something that you're really interested in. So that makes it a lot easier for me to, for example, for uni, I was not interested in studying law. So the actual motivation to go out and do, say, 3 hours of reading, no hope of it. But now I don't actually find it too difficult to actually bring myself to do that time outside of the classroom. I think you've just got to, again, see the light at the end of the time. It's worth doing the hard work there, because you will get rewarded with a fantastic career.
I think that will probably be the main takeaway, is that you actually have to be passionate about this and want to do it. And if you do want to do it, you will do more of it. If you're doing something you're interested in, any amount of study is going to feel like hell.
You're going to get challenges thrown up at you, but it's how you respond to those challenges that really make the difference, and what will make you really stand out to the airlines.
Stay prepared.
Be prepared. Be resilient.
Any final thing you'd like to say?
Thank you to everyone who has helped me along this journey. There's a lot of people that I need to thank. Andy Harms, Piers, Max Mingay, lots of others that, if I was to reel off the full list, it would take way too long. Lots of people to thank for this. and I owe a lot to them.
We'll have to catch up with you when you're flying the big stuff.